The village where Zara lived was a small, tranquil place nestled between rolling hills and lush green fields. The houses were simple, built with thatched roofs and wooden walls, and there was a sense of serenity in the air. Despite its beauty, the village was deeply rooted in old customs, and the villagers still whispered about curses and omens, legends passed down from generation to generation. At first glance, it seemed like a peaceful place, but there was a subtle tension in the air, something that felt both ancient and present, just beneath the surface. Zara, the daughter of a humble farmer, had always been different from the other children in the village. While they were content with their simple lives, working in the fields and following tradition, Zara dreamed of something more. She wanted to study, to see the world beyond the hills that surrounded their village. She wasn't content to follow the life laid out for her, bound to marry and live the same life as every woman in the village before her. But these dreams often made her feel like an outsider, like something was wrong with her for wanting more than what the village offered. Her father, once a kind and loving man, had changed since he married Amara. He had been consumed by her charm and beauty, and the bond he shared with Zara seemed to fade with every passing day. Amara, his new wife, was everything Zara's mother had not been: cold, calculating, and far too aware of the village's superstitions. She had brought her own daughter, the stepsister, into their home. The stepsister, a graceful young girl, was adored by her mother, and quickly became the apple of Zara's father's eye. Unlike Zara, who had always felt the weight of expectation and responsibility, the stepsister seemed to glide through life, effortlessly drawing attention and affection wherever she went. Though her stepsister appeared innocent, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was an emptiness behind her smiles, a quiet malice that only Zara seemed to notice. The more time passed, the more Zara began to realize that her stepmother's affection for her was a facade, a carefully crafted act that hid a much darker purpose. Her father's eyes, once filled with love for his daughter, now seemed clouded and distant, and Zara could feel the growing rift between them. As Zara watched the way her father doted on her stepsister, a deep resentment grew inside her. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison, with every corner of it holding memories of what she had lost. The love, the warmth, and the bond that had once been so strong between her and her father. Amara's presence seemed to take over everything, as if she had cast a shadow over Zara's life, replacing the light with something far colder and more sinister. It wasn't long before Zara began to suspect that her stepmother's motives were not as innocent as they appeared. The village, with all its old stories and warnings, seemed to whisper of something deeper, something darker lurking in the heart of her stepmother's plans, something that would soon come to light. After Zara's mother passed away, her father seemed lost in grief, a shadow of the man he had once been. The love he had shared with Zara was the only thing that had kept him grounded during that dark time. But when Amara entered their lives, everything began to shift. At first, Zara had hoped that her father would find happiness again. She wanted him to have a companion to help ease the pain of losing her mother, and maybe, just maybe, someone who could fill the void that had grown between them. But Amara was different from what Zara had expected. She had a way of charming her father, weaving herself seamlessly into his life until Zara's place in their home felt less certain. Amara's soft voice, her beauty, her calculated kindness, all of it seemed to draw Zara's father further away from her. She had been the center of his world, the apple of his eye, but now she was slowly becoming a stranger to him. Zara tried to cling to the remnants of their relationship, but her father was always distant, his attention more often than not diverted by Amara's needs. It didn't take long for Zara to realize that Amara wasn't simply a stepmother trying to adjust to a new family. She was something far more calculating, far more manipulative. Zara's father, once so sure of himself, began to lose his confidence. Amara spoke often about what was best for the family, her voice laced with subtle hints of superiority. She planted seeds of doubt in his mind, making him question the stability of their future, especially Zara's future. According to Amara, Zara's wild dreams, her desire for something more than the simple life in the village, were dangerous. Her ambitions were a threat, a risk to the family's stability. Amara would tell Zara's father that their misfortunes, failed crops, sick livestock, and unexplained accidents were signs of bad luck, and Zara was to blame. She whispered that Zara's rebellious spirit was a curse, that her very presence was the cause of all the bad fortune that had befallen them. The more Zara's father heard these words, the more distant he became. The connection that had once been so strong between them seemed to crumble under the weight of Amara's influence. The loving father she had once known was no longer there. Zara felt as though she were fading into the background, becoming invisible in the eyes of the man who had once been her protector. Meanwhile, Amara's daughter, Zara's stepsister, flourished under her mother's watchful eye. She was everything Zara was not, obedient, docile, and perfectly content to fit into the mold that was expected of her. Where Zara was spirited and full of dreams, her stepsister was the embodiment of the village's ideals, content with a quiet life, willing to marry and settle down just as the village tradition dictated. Amara lavished attention on her daughter, encouraging her to take on more responsibilities, preparing her for a future of wealth and power. Zara's stepsister, who once seemed shy and unsure, blossomed under her mother's praise. Amara would boast about her daughter's beauty and intelligence, about how she was destined for greatness, while Zara was left in the shadows, her hopes for the future quietly dismissed. Zara began to see the pattern. Her stepmother's favoritism towards her stepsister wasn't just about love or admiration. It was part of a larger plan. Amara was grooming her daughter for a future of privilege, while Zara, the biological daughter, was being set aside, her dreams and future discarded like an unwanted possession. The subtle exclusion, the isolation, were all part of the same game, a game Zara hadn't even realized she was playing until it was too late. It became clearer to Zara that Amara's manipulations were more than just petty favoritism. The stepmother was bent on controlling everything, including Zara's future. In her eyes, Zara's ambitions were a threat to the power she was trying to build for her own daughter. Slowly, Zara began to realize the truth. She wasn't just losing her father, she was losing everything that she had once believed was hers by right. One evening, as the shadows grew long and the faint whispers of the village's old legends seemed to stir in the air, Zara found herself alone with her father and stepmother in the dimly lit living room. It was a strange moment, filled with an unsettling stillness, and Zara could sense that something was about to change, though she couldn't yet grasp what it was. Amara sat across from her father, her expression calm, almost too calm. Zara had learned to read her stepmother's face over the months. Every smile was a mask, every word carefully chosen. Tonight, however, something in Amara's eyes seemed different. There was a coldness there, a sharpness that made Zara's stomach twist. "I've been thinking," Amara began, her voice smooth like honey, "about the future of our family, the prosperity we all desire, the happiness we deserve." Zara's father, ever the obedient one, nodded slowly, his gaze heavy and distant. The faint lines on his face were deepened by years of struggle and loss, and it was as if every word Amara spoke held him in a trance. Zara watched in silence, her chest tightening with unease. Amara continued, her words wrapping around Zara's father like a web. "Our daughter," she said, referring to Zara's stepsister with the softness of a mother's love. "She has a future so bright. She deserves the best. But the road to greatness is not always smooth, especially when there are obstacles in the way. The universe has a way of balancing things out, of ensuring that those destined for greatness are not hindered by others." Zara felt her heart drop. The words were familiar, but the meaning behind them hit her like a cold, dark wave. Her father looked at Amara with furrowed brows. "What are you suggesting?" Amara's gaze flickered towards Zara, a sly smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "It's simple, really," she said. "In order for the future to be secured, one of us must make a sacrifice. Zara!" Zara stiffened at the mention of her name, the air around her growing thick with dread. "Zara must sacrifice her future," Amara continued, her voice now a velvet whisper. "Only then can our family be free from the burden of misfortune. Only then will the village gods look kindly upon us." The words hit Zara like a blow to the chest. Sacrifice. The word echoed in her mind, spinning her thoughts in a dizzying whirl. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, as the weight of what was being asked of her pressed down on her shoulders. Her eyes flickered to her father, desperate for him to see the truth, but his face was clouded, distant. He didn't seem to understand the gravity of what Amara was suggesting. "Your life, Zara," Amara continued, her eyes gleaming, "is meant to be one of hardship. You are the one who must bear the burden of our misfortunes. You must accept that your future is not for you to shape. It is for the greater good of the family. In exchange, your stepsister will flourish. She will have wealth, power, influence, and the family will prosper." Zara's breath caught in her throat. Her father's silence was deafening. He didn't speak, didn't argue. His eyes were fixed on Amara, as if in a trance. Zara's heart raced in her chest, and she felt her world begin to tilt. Her future, her dreams, her hopes, everything, were being taken from her in an instant. And for what? To secure a life of privilege for her stepsister. To ensure the family's well-being. Amara's voice softened, almost sweetly. "This is not a curse, Zara. It is a gift to the family, a gift to your stepsister. You will find peace in knowing that your sacrifice will bring prosperity to those you love." But Zara didn't feel peace. She felt the sting of betrayal, the weight of an unseen hand pressing down on her chest. This wasn't a gift, it was a trap, a cruel manipulation, disguised as something noble. And the worst part, her father, the one person she trusted above all, was part of it. In the village there was an old legend, one that Zara had often heard in hushed tones around the fire. It spoke of a powerful god, or demon that could grant prosperity, but at a price. A daughter's future could be traded in exchange for the rise of another. The sacrifices would always be subtle, hidden behind the veil of tradition and superstition, but the cost would always be the same. A life of hardship, a life of unfulfilled potential, a life bound by the whims of others. Zara's blood ran cold as she realized the horrifying truth. Her stepmother wasn't just speaking metaphorically. She was invoking the power of that ancient legend, using it to bind Zara's fate. And her father, too weak to see through the illusion, had agreed to it. Zara's future had been traded away, and she was powerless to stop it. As Amara's words continued to swirl around her, Zara felt her world crumble. Her dreams, her hopes, her entire existence had been reduced to nothing more than a tool to secure someone else's future. She was doomed, cursed, and she couldn't see a way out. But deep within her, something sparked, faint but unyielding. She couldn't accept this, not without a fight. As the days passed after that fateful conversation, Zara's mind was consumed by the oppressive weight of the deal her stepmother had made. Every time she looked at her father, now a mere shadow of the man he had once been, a sickening sense of betrayal twisted in her gut. But it was when Zara started to notice the oddities, those small, unsettling details about her stepmother, that everything began to change. At first, they were easy to ignore, fleeting moments that seemed insignificant in the grand scheme of things. The way Amara would disappear into the woods at night, returning before dawn with a strange, almost haunting glow in her eyes. The old herbs and strange powders that she kept hidden in the corners of the house. The faint smell of incense, that lingered long after she had left the room. And the most disturbing of all, the whispered chants Zara would hear in the dead of night, just before Amara entered her chambers. But it wasn't until Zara discovered her mother's old chest, hidden deep in the attic, that she began to piece together the truth. Her mother had passed away when Zara was just a child, but the memory of her, the warmth, the love, and the lessons she had imparted was still vivid in Zara's mind. Her mother had been a healer, known throughout the village for her knowledge of herbs, potions, and old remedies. But what Zara hadn't known was that her mother's healing abilities went beyond just physical ailments. She had been versed in the old ways, the ancient knowledge that the villagers whispered about in secret, the knowledge of the spirits and the unseen forces that governed their lives. As Zara dug through the chest, she found her mother's journals, handwritten in delicate script, detailing her studies and encounters with the mystical and the supernatural. One entry caught her eye, a description of a woman, a figure that sounded eerily familiar. It was Amara. The journal detailed how her mother had crossed paths with Amara long before she had married Zara's father. Amara had been a rising figure in the village, a woman with ambition and charm, someone who sought power at any cost. But her mother had seen through her guise. She had recognized the darkness in Amara's heart, the lengths she would go to for control. Zara's mother had tried to warn her father about the woman he was marrying, but he had not listened, blinded by grief and the desire to move on. As Zara continued to read, she uncovered the shocking truth. Amara had not only been trying to manipulate her father, she had already used her daughter, the stepsister Zara had come to resent so much, as a pawn in a similar scheme years earlier. In her younger days, Amara had sacrificed her own daughter's future, trading it away in exchange for wealth, power, and influence. Her daughter's life had been one of subjugation, her future sacrificed to secure Amara's place among the village elites. This was the curse. This was the true nature of the so-called sacrifice. It wasn't some supernatural force or vengeful god demanding the trade of a life. It was Amara, with her cold, calculating nature, using superstition and fear to manipulate everyone around her. She had used the same tactic on Zara's mother years ago, and now she was repeating it with Zara herself. The more Zara read, the more the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The strange rituals her stepmother practiced, the whispered chants, the sacrifices made to gods she didn't fully understand. All of it had been part of Amara's quest for control. She wasn't invoking some ancient curse from the village gods or demons. It was her own twisted version of a curse, one that she had created to ensure that she could take what she wanted, at the expense of others' futures. Zara sat in the attic, her heart pounding as the full weight of the truth sank in. The so-called curse wasn't something mystical or supernatural. It was a cruel, calculated manipulation. Her mother's death had been part of it, a casualty in a long-standing scheme to weaken the family and keep them under Amara's control. Zara's mother had unknowingly thwarted Amara's rise to power by simply being a woman who could see through the deception. Zara now realized that her own fate had been sealed long before she had ever understood what was happening. Amara's entire plan had been designed to destroy her. The curse was never meant to be some divine punishment. It was simply the price Zara had to pay for standing in the way of her stepmother's ambition. She felt a deep, burning anger rise within her. Her mother's death, the years of manipulation, her father's blind submission to Amara's influence. It was all connected. Zara understood now that Amara had never loved her, never wanted her as part of the family. Zara was nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded when no longer needed. But in that moment, a spark of defiance flickered inside Zara's chest. She had learned the truth, and with it came the power to change everything. No longer would she be a pawn in her stepmother's game. No longer would she let her future be stolen from her. As the weight of the truth settled in her mind, Zara made a vow. She would break the curse. She would not allow her stepmother's twisted manipulation to define her. Zara would fight for her destiny, no matter the cost. The days following Zara's discovery were a blur, filled with a mixture of rage and confusion. She couldn't let the truth sit idly within her. It was like a fire burning in her chest, urging her to act, to break free. But the more she thought about her next steps, the more overwhelming it became. Amara was cunning, calculating. How could she, Zara, a mere girl from a humble village, hope to outwit her? There were moments when doubt crept in, whispering that maybe the curse was real, maybe she was powerless. But deep down, Zara knew she couldn't let herself be a victim any longer. She would find a way to fight back. Each morning, Zara could feel the walls closing in around her. Amara's presence had become suffocating. Her icy demeanour, her calculated smiles, the way she effortlessly pulled her father further into her grasp. Zara would often catch a glimpse of her father, distant and unresponsive, his eyes glazed over, and it broke her heart. He was lost to her, caught in the web of his new wife's manipulation. Yet every time Zara tried to confront him, he turned away, unable or unwilling to see the truth. But Zara wasn't about to give up. If her father wouldn't listen, if the village clung to their old superstitions, she would have to take matters into her own hands. The realization that Amara had manipulated everyone, including her father, sparked something fierce within her. She knew she had to unmask her stepmother for what she truly was, a master manipulator, a deceiver who had used fear to control them all. Zara began to study her stepmother more carefully. She watched every little movement, listened for any hint of weakness or inconsistency. Amara was good at hiding her true nature, but Zara was beginning to see the cracks in her armor. There were moments when Amara's calm facade slipped, when her eyes would narrow or her smile would falter, and Zara could sense a raw edge beneath the surface. It was in those moments that Zara found her strength. Amara, despite all her power and control, was still human. She could be undone. One evening, after another tense dinner, where Amara made subtle digs at Zara, mocking her aspirations and questioning her worth, Zara found herself standing alone by the fire in the living room. Her heart raced as she replayed the conversation in her mind. Her mind was clearer now. She would expose Amara for the fraud she was, reveal her manipulations to the village, and if necessary, break her father's spell. But doubt still clung to her like a shadow. What if Amara was too powerful? What if the village refused to listen? What if her own father turned against her? In the stillness, Zara heard a soft voice behind her. "Zara, are you all right?" It was her stepsister, standing in the doorway, her face filled with concern. Zara's chest tightened. She had been avoiding her stepsister, the one person who seemed to still hold a place in her father's heart, the one who seemed so blissfully unaware of the dark forces at play. Zara turned, forcing a smile, though the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. "I'm fine," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. Her stepsister, who had always seemed innocent and kind, frowned, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "You don't look fine. You've been different lately." Zara could feel the weight of the unspoken questions hanging between them. Her stepsister had no idea what was really happening, what her mother was doing, and Zara couldn't bring herself to tell her. Not yet. Not until she understood more. "I'm just thinking," Zara replied, her words cold and distant. "Just trying to figure things out." Her stepsister studied her for a long moment, the frown deepening. "You've been distant. I don't understand. Why have you been so angry with Mother lately? She's only trying to help." Zara's heart raced. The words felt like a slap. How could her stepsister not see it? Could she really be so blind? Zara's frustration bubbled to the surface, but she bit her tongue. If she wasn't careful, she would push her stepsister further away. I don't think you understand what's really going on, Zara said, her voice strained, but she quickly realized how harsh it sounded. You think everything is fine, but you don't see how she's controlling all of us. You don't see how she's using you too. Her stepsister recoiled, her eyes wide with shock. What are you talking about? She whispered, her voice trembling slightly. What do you mean, using me? Zara shook her head, the anger flaring up inside her. She wanted to scream, to make her stepsister understand, but she knew it would only drive a wedge between them. For the first time, she saw the naivete in her stepsister's eyes, the blind faith that everything was fine, that her mother's intentions were pure. I can't explain it all right now, Zara said, her voice softening despite herself. But you'll understand one day. You have to. Just be careful. Her stepsister stared at her for a long time, as if trying to piece together what Zara was saying. But then she simply shook her head. You're being dramatic. I don't understand. But I'm not going to fight you. If you need space, fine. But I wish you would talk to me. Zara turned away, the weight of the conversation pressing heavily on her heart. She didn't want to push her stepsister away, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the girl was, in some way, a part of the web Amara had spun. Zara's frustration mounted. Her stepsister didn't understand, and Zara had no way of explaining it. But one thing was clear: the tension between them had grown. Zara could no longer keep silent, and her growing defiance against Amara's manipulation was starting to show. Whether her stepsister understood it or not, the storm was coming, and Zara would not stand idly by as her future was stolen. Zara had made up her mind. She would fight for her destiny, whether her stepsister, her father, or the whole village understood it or not. The first stirrings of rebellion were taking root, and Zara was ready to confront the darkness that had taken hold of her family. The tension that had been building inside Zara for weeks reached a breaking point one cold evening as the moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the village. She couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the manipulation, the suffocating control that Amara had over her and the entire family. Zara had seen the truth, understood the curse for what it really was, and now she had to confront it. It was time to face her stepmother head-on, to demand the answers she had been too afraid to ask. Zara waited until her father was asleep, his heavy breathing filling the silence of their modest home. Amara was in the kitchen, preparing something for herself, no doubt. Zara knew this was the moment. There would be no more running from the truth, no more allowing Amara to twist her life into something unrecognizable. She would confront the woman who had ruined everything, who had manipulated her family for her own gain. With her heart pounding in her chest, Zara stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her eyes burning with determination. Amara was bent over a pot, stirring something, completely unaware of Zara's presence. For a moment, the air between them felt thick, like the calm before a storm. Amara, Zara said, her voice steady but firm. We need to talk. Amara's head snapped up, her cold eyes narrowing. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but it was quickly masked by the usual composed demeanor. What's this about, Zara? She asked, her tone syrupy sweet, but there was a warning edge beneath it. I'm done being your puppet, Zara declared, stepping into the room, her fists clenched at her sides. I know what you've done. I know the truth about the curse. You've been manipulating us all. My father, me, everyone. But I'm not going to stand by while you destroy everything my mother worked for. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then Amara's lips curled into a sly smile, her eyes glinting with something darker. Oh, Zara, she said, her voice low and venomous. You really think you know everything, don't you? Zara's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't back down. I know you sacrificed your own daughter's future to get what you wanted. You're not some misunderstood woman trying to protect her family. You're a manipulator, a liar, and you've used superstition and fear to control us all." Amara's smile faltered for a moment, then disappeared completely. She straightened, her posture becoming rigid, and Zara could see the true nature of the woman who had once seemed so kind and loving. Amara was a woman consumed by power, willing to destroy anything in her path to secure her position. "You're wrong," she said softly, but with an unmistakable threat in her voice. "You don't understand, Zara. Everything I've done has been for the greater good. Your mother was weak. She couldn't see it. But I can. I always knew you were destined for nothing, and now you've come to the realization that you're just a tool, a stepping stone for something greater." Zara recoiled at the venom in her words, but something inside her snapped. The fear that had held her captive for so long was gone. The truth was her weapon now, and she would wield it with everything she had. "I am not your tool, Amara," Zara spat, her voice rising with newfound strength. "And I will not let you destroy my future, just like you did to your own daughter. You don't control me anymore. I won't be a part of your twisted plans." Amara's face twisted in fury. "You think you can stop me? You think you can break the curse? You think you have any power over me?" Her voice was sharp, biting. "You have no idea what you're up against. You're nothing without me." But Zara's anger, her determination, was stronger than any of the stepmother's taunts. She had spent too long in silence, too long being controlled. Now, she knew the truth. Amara's so-called curse was nothing but a lie, a manipulation designed to break her spirit. And Zara refused to let it happen. "You're wrong," Zara said, her voice steady now, full of resolve. "You're the one who's powerless. You've spent your life hiding behind lies and fear. But it's over. Your hold on me is finished." At that moment, a soft voice interrupted the confrontation. The village elder, old Damer, stepped into the kitchen, her frail figure silhouetted by the dim light of the doorway. She had been a silent witness to the growing tensions in the village, and she had known Zara's mother long before Amara had arrived. Old Damer had been one of the few who had seen through Amara's facade and had quietly watched from the sidelines, waiting for the right moment. "I've seen enough," Old Damer said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of years of wisdom. "The curse you speak of, Amara, is no curse at all. It is a lie, one you've spun to control the people around you." Amara's eyes flickered to Old Damer, but she quickly regained her composure. "You know nothing about me, old woman. This is none of your business." "Perhaps not," Old Damer said, her gaze steady. "But it is the business of the village. The truth always finds a way to surface. And Zara is right. This curse you speak of is nothing but manipulation." Zara stood tall now, the presence of Old Damer giving her strength. The realization of how far Amara had gone to control them all, how deeply she had buried the truth in superstition, had sparked a fire inside her. The time for fear and silence was over. "Zara," Old Damer continued, "your mother was no fool." She knew the price of power, and she knew that no curse could bind a woman's fate unless she allowed it. This is your moment. You can break the chains that hold you. You are not your stepmother's pawn. Zara turned to face Amara, her eyes blazing. The woman before her was no longer the charming stepmother she had once known. She was nothing more than a shadow of manipulation and lies. And in this moment, Zara saw the truth clearly. She was the one with the power now. With a deep breath, Zara stepped forward. "This ends now." In a final act of defiance, Zara reached into her pocket, pulling out a small pendant, one that her mother had given her as a child. It had always been a symbol of her mother's strength, and Zara now understood its true meaning. She held it high, staring down Amara with unyielding resolve. "I choose my own path," Zara said, her voice ringing with power. "I am not cursed. and I will not be controlled by you. The pendant glowed faintly in the dim light, as if in response to Zara's declaration. Amara's eyes widened, her confident demeanor cracking for the first time. The curse, her dark influence, shattered in that moment, and Zara felt a powerful surge of freedom flood through her. Amara's face twisted in fury, but it was too late. The power she had so carefully crafted over the years crumbled, like sand slipping through her fingers. Zara had broken the curse, and with it she had reclaimed her future. The stepmother's dark influence had no hold over her anymore. Zara stepped back, her chest rising and falling with the weight of the battle she had fought. She was free, free to choose her own destiny, free to build a life of her own design. The curse was broken, the power was hers.